You ever felt like your life was a trailer for a movie no one asked for, but the universe keeps playing it on repeat? Well, that's me right there. Here's a highlight reel of chaos and character development in my life. I've spent years making music, performing, producing, creating soundtracks for indie films, even doing shows in Las Vegas and on cruise ships. Throwing some video production gigs in China, and I was out here feeling like things were solid, or so I thought. Cue the dramatic plot twist. So, what happens when God's like, cute plan, but I've got something else in store for you? In 2020, the pandemic decided to lock me down in China like a bad roommate. Fast forward to 2023, I finally make it back to the US and boom, my storage unit robbed. 90% of my music and video gear gone. Most of my personal stuff yeeted. Just poof. It was giving Job, but make it modern. And yet, I pushed forward with what little I had left, like the stubborn optimist that I pretend to be. So a few months later, life was like, let's spice things up, and someone broke into my stuff again. This time, they took the last of my gear. At this point, all I had was my camera, a laptop, and a kind of existential dread that feels kind of cozy. Was this a test, a punishment? Was God's way of saying maybe your true calling is knitting? Well, honestly, it felt like life was throwing hands and I was losing the fight. So what do you do when life feels like it's been stripped down to a TikTok soundbite of chaos? I remembered Job from the Bible, the OG of loss and perseverance. He said, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. So I tried not to let the bitterness take over instead of spiraling, which I really wanted to do. I let God work in my heart. I chose trust in Him, not in my gear, not my plans, not my talents, not my half-baked goals. And spoiler alert, it's harder than it sounds. But the plot twist is what you've been waiting for. What if loss isn't the end? It's the setup for something better. So it's almost nothing left. I clung to the belief that God wasn't done with me. I took on some small gigs, worked with what little I had left, and eventually I made it back to China. And that's when the absolute legends, Suli and her family, took me in, reminding me that God's provision doesn't ghost you. It's just in His own timing. Slowly, I'm starting to find my creative flow again. So what's the takeaway here? Life will humble you faster than a bad haircut, but God's gifts are not ours to stash under the bed or bury in your backyard. Even when I wanted to throw in the towel, His grace kept nudging me forward. That's why I'm here. I'm creating content and making music for the Dream Miracle Project. Not because I've got it all figured out, but because I believe the messy middle can still be beautiful. Here's the deal. No one cares about your posts until they do. So thanks enough for caring enough to listen this far. I'm not extraordinary yet. I'm floating somewhere in between trying my best and low-key thriving with a little bit of mediocrity. But if you're down to stick around, let's turn those mediocre moments into something worthwhile. Not because we're amazing, but because God is. Together we'll craft something beautiful, or at least hopefully entertaining. Stay tuned. Let's see where this wild ride takes us. And let's, as I like to say, let's craft your path.